Welcome to the office where our door is always open. I am your host, Goretti, Managing Director of HRWise. Today we will be discussing instructional design, and I'm joined by Mrs. Janelle Edward, who is a certified performance and learning professional. Janelle has a master's degree in instructional design from Florida State University. She has over 10 years experience in the field, having worked as a teacher, a trainer, a course developer, among others, and she has held senior roles as a talent development professional in some of the region's leading organizations. She has also worked as an independent consultant on several projects with the University of the West Indies Open Campus over the last 5 years. And in 2018, she incorporated her own company called Instructional Design Solutions, Inc., where she serves as the principal instructional designer. So it is my pleasure to welcome Janelle to the office. Thank you so much for accepting my invitation to be here today.
Thank you. It is a pleasure and it's a great opportunity. So I'm happy to be here.
All right, great. So instructional design, Janelle. To our viewers who've not heard that term before, we know that HR is very broad. Mm-hmm. When we talk about the field of human resource management, there are many areas to choose from. You have selected an area that is not very common.
That is true.
So can you share with our viewers why instructional design?
Sure. Instructional design, as you mentioned, is part of the talent development field. And although the term may not be familiar to a lot of persons, especially persons outside the academic world, people really do know about it because some persons are actually practicing it right now. Instructional design, in a nutshell, is the process to create instructional materials or experiences. And when I say instructional materials, you're talking about anything which teaches somebody or anything where they would be learning something from. So whether you're talking about a curriculum, lesson plans in terms of your educators, or you're talking about training programs, a sales course, e-learning, whether you're talking about a performance improvement program, it's a matter of how the process that you use, it's a very systematic and a systemic process to create those materials and those experiences.
Right, so we can imagine that is used very widely within the teaching industry. And so more teachers would be familiar with that. But it's not very often we hear that conversation come up when we talk about human resource management. So share with us, what value does something like instructional design bring to organizations, and why is it even important to consider
Sure. Based on my experience, having worked as a training officer, training manager, even a learning and development manager, I know the constraints that go along with those jobs in terms of sometimes not having enough time to follow the full process in terms of developing training material. What instructional design does is that it starts from the beginning, or in some cases you could say it starts with the end in mind. So in instructional design, an instructional designer would come in knowing, having the skill and the knowledge of the processes involved, investigate what exactly is the problem, first of all. So it's not a matter of somebody coming in and saying, just create some training for me. An instructional designer would not respond to that. Yeah, they would try to figure out, why do you need training? What are the issues you're trying to address? They would then start with the process, do the assessment, create the objectives, make sure if it is training in fact that is needed, because instructional design can address both instructional and non-instructional solutions. So you go through the process and make sure that your objectives are properly aligned, you have the material that will show you the results you're trying to achieve. I think it's important because a lot of organizations that have a focus on HR or even talent development, sometimes these professionals just don't have the time to really go through the entire process, so that when persons receive some sort of training or they're put through some sort of learning experience, at the end the company sees results even in the bottom line. Mainly sometimes they don't have the time or they don't have the skill and the knowledge.
Right.
So I think that's where you find the gap, and that's where there is a need for such a talent.
Okay, so tell us a little bit more about your company. You launched last year. So tell us a little bit about what services you offer and how you are able to come into an organization and really add value to that process to assist the managers and persons who may not necessarily have the time to go through the instructional design process.
Well, the company is new, as you said. I have been functioning as an instructional designer since obtaining my degree, and even maybe a little bit before that. But I decided that there was work coming to me. You know, there were persons reaching out, like I mentioned with UE, because within the academic field, it's something that is known. It's used very much in terms of curriculum development. And I had the opportunity where there was an international company that had approached another colleague of mine, and I partnered with her, and we were able to use my skill in instructional design and her own expertise to create a sales training program, which that company has now taken and is selling to their clients.
Right.
And in using that process, I saw, well, hey, there's an opportunity for more projects like that, not just within St. Lucia, but within the region and beyond. So I took the leap and I decided, let's get this going. Let's try to reach out to organizations. It has been challenging because, like you said, they're not necessarily familiar with instructional design, but I think there's the need for it. And I'm trying to fill that gap and spread the word that of what instructional design really is.
Okay. We do have to take our first break. And when we come back, we will continue the conversation. Okay, so don't go anywhere, viewers. We'll be right back.
The Office is brought to you by Renwick & Company Limited, multi-graphics powered by Expert Group and the Goddard Catering Group.
Welcome back, and thank you so much for staying with us. I'm joined today by Mrs. Janelle Edward, and we're discussing training and development, and more specifically, instructional design. So Janelle, before the break, you mentioned about some of the challenges that you've had since launching your company. And I was interested in finding out, what are some of the challenges that you faced, considering the fact that this is a fairly new area for a lot of persons. What are some of the challenges that you've encountered?
I would say in terms of persons wanting things right away. So you would have an organization that would maybe approach you and say, okay, well, I heard that you offer training. Right. So they would, expect that I would come in and they would say to me, okay, well, I need customer service training. I need this and the other. Can I get this next month?
Right.
And then I would have to reel them back and say, well, no, what I do is really start off with a needs assessment, to investigate what exactly are your challenges, what are you trying to achieve. And I find in some cases, persons are not too sure. They have an idea that training is important, so they want training done, but they're not too sure what exactly they're trying to achieve once the training is done.
Right.
What it is those persons are supposed to do, what it is they're supposed to know, what objectives are you trying to achieve. So sometimes you think it's a little bit too time consuming, the process to properly develop that training material. I don't always deliver as well. So I'm more on the back end in terms of designing and developing the training. But the mindset normally is that once you hire somebody to do training, the person just comes in and deliver a session for you.
Right.
So getting persons to understand that I am not a facilitator, I'm not a trainer, I am an instructional designer, which means that I will develop your content for you and you can take it and do whatever you want with it.
Right.
So I think that has been a little bit challenging in terms of changing the mindset to understand that instructional design is more about the development as opposed to the delivery.
Yeah.
That's one.
So companies can actually get you to design these programs and they can decide how they're actually going to deliver, whether it's face-to-face, whether it's via e-learning.
Exactly.
From your experience, do you think we have enough of this, or do you think that persons are open enough to consider the value that sort of service brings to the organizations?
Depending on the organization and what their internal HR team or talent development team looks like. Because in some organizations, as you would know, they don't necessarily have persons with that skill set, but they do understand that training is needed. Now, I would say, depending on how important the issue or the problem is, that's when there may be scope for me to come in. Because if it's something, and I don't want to say something simple, because it's not that I only take on complex cases, but if it's sort of just you're doing a checkbox where you just want to run a session that, like a refresher session that you run all the time, there may not be need for me to come in, because in a case like that, it's something you've done already. You, to a certain extent, you know what you want, so I wouldn't have to go through the full process. But with a company that maybe has some critical issues and they're really looking for somebody to try to figure out what it is that we really need. Or on the other end, where it might be useful are for companies that are interested in e-learning, because that's another service that I offer. So there may be companies who want to try something different from the traditional classroom training, and they may want maybe like an onboarding program. You have persons coming in, as opposed to having them sit and they read this material, they read that material, they shadow this person, they shadow that person. You may decide, well, let's change it up a bit. I can create that as well. So there's scope where persons are looking at e-learning as opposed to the traditional classroom training. Those are things that I can fulfill as well.
So does your company also offer technical support? So for example, if an organization wants to do an app for learning or create a learning environment and introduce technology, you know, I know some companies introduce universities, online universities. Can you provide? I know you wouldn't be the one to actually design that component, but do you have partners or do you work with persons closely who can deliver that support to companies?
I can, and what I can also do is offer them advice as to what is the best way to maybe incorporate something that I develop into their existing learning management system. So, or if they don't have a learning management system in place, I can probably advise them as to what is the best way to go about selecting one and what are the benefits of having a learning management system. So in terms of maybe just advising them, that's where I could assist them.
Okay, so for an organization that is listening to us here and is interested in designing a particular program to address a particular need, what steps do they have to take?
Call me.
So tell them, how do they reach you?
I do have a website, still in the beginning stages to a certain extent, but I can be contacted via my website, which is www.instructionaldesignsolutionsinc.com. There is a contact form, so the email will come directly to me. I can be contacted at 758-484-6219. That is my mobile number, so you can give me a call or you can email me, janellededward@gmail.com.
Okay, excellent. So you see, we have multiple ways of reaching you for that kind of support. I think it is very interesting, and I'm happy that you have launched this organization, and I can tell you that we will have some business opportunities.
I like to hear that.
Because you know, we do quite a bit of training, and just like you, we're trying to close that gap, and we're trying to add value. It's not just about going to the training and ticking a box and saying we've done the training, but to really address the core issues that the organizations are facing, and to translate that into value for them is what. And I know that just listening to you, that's exactly what you're trying to achieve as well.
There's one, as you mentioned, organizations like yourself, there's one other service that we offer, which is what I term cost conversion. And that I would target training vendors. So there are a lot of persons who go into organizations and offer training. So, and in most cases, it's classroom-based training. Those persons may have an interest in converting some of their classroom training material into an online format. So those are also opportunities for me, and persons who are in that field could contact me to see how we can go about maybe getting some of their existing material into an online format and offering that package to their clients.
Okay. All right. Excellent. We do need to take another break, so viewers, stay with us. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Welcome back, and thank you so much for staying with us. We are discussing talent management, but most specifically instructional design. So Janelle, one of the areas that I have noted is an area of concern for us is customer service. And this is an area, I think it's a good example to share because it's an area that persons go through a lot of training. We have companies who have refreshers every year. Persons go to multiple workshops, which are generally face-to-face classroom types workshops. Yet we continue to have an issue with customer service. So can you help us understand what value does it actually bring to an organization in a scenario like that? So how does it compare going the route of instructional design, ensuring that you design the program in a particular way versus using a standard workshop that in terms of what we normally do?
Okay, that is a good question because I have had experience with a company who was interested in just that. Their concern when we had our initial discussion is that, like you said, their representatives had been on training before, they do refresher training, and the concern was that those persons come out of the classroom, back onto the job, they do exactly the same thing. So their thought was that maybe the classroom training was not effective. Now that alone is an assumption. So in coming in with instructional design, I would not say, okay, well, let me just design something different that's going to be impactful and your employees are going to love it and they'll do something differently. My process with instructional design, which includes performance analysis, is to figure out, is it really that the classroom training was not effective? Is it that those persons don't know what to do properly? Or is it that maybe they don't want to do it? So you first need to determine, is it really instruction that is the solution? Right. So that's why instructional design differs from training, because as a training professional, the person would probably just come in and say, okay, your training didn't work previously, let me nice it up for you. I'll come with something different, something exciting. As an instructional designer, I start from the very end and I say, well, is it really the training that is needed? Maybe you just need a change in your process. Maybe there are no consequences when persons don't do what they're supposed to do. Maybe they're being rewarded for poor performance. So that's the difference with instructional design. I would do a proper assessment. If I determine that yes, there is a lack of skill, there is a lack of knowledge, then instructional design does a learner analysis. I look at who are the persons who are going to receive that training. What will work for them? Should it be in the classroom? Should it be online? Should it be delivered by somebody inside the organization, outside the organization? So it's just a bit more of a thorough process. And the benefit to that is that you will get results at the end of the day. So if the company in question was experiencing very low CSAT or customer satisfaction scores. So they had a real issue where to hit their bottom line, they wanted to improve those scores. So of course, if I'm designing a program, I need to keep that in mind. My aim is to increase those scores. What is it going to take to increase those scores? Once persons leave the training, whether it's classroom or online, how are we going to assess them? How are we going to measure changes in their behavior? How are we going to determine if it's impacting our sales, our customer service? So you tie everything together, and I think that's where instructional design takes it a little bit further than maybe somebody just offering training services.
Right. So you design this program and you hand it over to the person who's going to deliver, the trainer. Is there an assessment done afterwards?
That can be included.
As part of, okay.
Yes. So instructional design goes past implementation into evaluation as well. And there are 4 levels you can evaluate at. So you have your normal evaluation, how did the training session go? Then you have the next level, did we actually learn anything from the session? So all of that would be included in the session that I designed. Then you want to look at, has there been a change in behavior? This is normally sometimes measured 3 to 6 months after the session. So all of that would be provided to the client once I develop the material. So they have recommendations as to how they can evaluate the impact. If they want me to come back in, that's fine. But normally I would give them recommendations as to how you can evaluate the impact of that instruction, if it is instruction that was needed.
Right. All right, so Janelle, we're quickly running out of time. Before we close, can you just share your contact details again with our viewers? So,
Sure.
for companies who are listening, they know exactly how to reach you.
Okay. Well, before I do that, I just want to say thank you again so much for having me.
You're
It
welcome.
was sort of short notice, but I'm really happy I was able to come on. And like I said at the beginning, it's a really good opportunity for me. So I appreciate that. So I can be contacted, Janelle Edward. So my email address is janellededward@gmail.com. You can call me at telephone 758-484-6219, or you can check out the website, which is www.instructionaldesignsolutionsinc.com.
All right, great. So again, thank you so much, Janelle. For our viewers who did not know much about instructional design, I hope that this episode has shed some light on the topic. For our young persons who are interested in the field of HR, this is just one example of the various areas that you can actually choose to focus on when trying to decide what element of HR you want to select. So until next time, we invite you to follow us on social media. Pay attention to what's happening on our Facebook, Instagram, Twitter pages, so you can remain up to date with what's happening here at HRWise. We will be launching soon our sister company, Talent Scope. So stay tuned. You will be seeing a lot more from us on that, and it promises to be very, very interesting. So we look forward to your continued support. And of course, if you have any questions and suggestions, feel free to reach out to us online by any of the social media platforms, and we'll be more than happy to respond. Until next time, take care.
The Office is brought to you by Renwick & Company Limited, multi-graphics powered by Expert Group and the Goddard Catering Group.